Hey everybody, it's Matt. Before we jump into the show today, I have a major announcement. The Investigator's Toolbox app is live. That's right, you can access this amazing website from your phone. We have versions available on iOS and on Android. All you have to do is visit the App Store and download and get started today. If you're a member of the community already, I encourage you to go in and download a version and get logged in, and you can access everything right from your phone. If you're not a member, go check it out, www.investigators-toolbox.com, or you can go to the App Store, Investigators Toolbox. Hope to see you in the community soon. Crosstracks case management system. That is what we are talking about today. Are you using a case management system? What are you waiting for? If you don't use a case management system, you really need to look into implementing that into your business regimen. I've been at it with Crosstracks now a little over a year, and it's just been a game changer for my business. They are SOC 2 certified, SOC 2 Type 2 certified. If you don't know what that means, it means that their encryption system is second to none, and you have to go through a whole screening process to figure out if you can even qualify for that, and they have. So you know with certainty your data is being protected. I don't think there's another case management system out there that offers that same ability to have the SOC 2 Type 2 certification. As you guys know, I've been singing the praises of Crosstracks, and I really believe in this product, and I believe you should check it out. Contact Brad, contact Pat, one of the team members over there, and see if it's right for you. Crosstracks case management system, check it out today.
SecureFBIDirectory.com is a global network of former FBI special agents who are active in the private investigation, security, and consulting fields. The Secure FBI Directory is the only directory in both print and digital formats founded by FBI special agents for FBI special agents. Special agents know firsthand how invaluable a directory is when looking for a professional located in a particular geographical area with a specific specialty. The Secure FBI Directory covers all continents except Antarctica and features over 80 specialties. If you are a former special agent now conducting private investigations or serving as consultants or security experts, go to SecureFBIDirectory.com to join this elite group of SA and become listed in its global directory. SecureFBIDirectory.com. Welcome to PI Perspectives. Jane Mason from Secure Investigation joins us to discuss a delicate topic: sexual assault investigations and evidence collection. Now, Jane had a long career with the FBI and did a significant amount of evidence collection. Today, we're going to discuss some of her tips and techniques, so listen up. Please welcome Jane Mason and your host, Private Investigator Matt Spaier.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. This is your host, Matt Spaier. So today we have a special show. I have a friend of mine, someone I've known for a couple of years, who is actually a former FBI agent. And today we're going to be talking about sexual assault and investigations. So Jane Mason, I want to welcome you to the program. How are you?
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so thanks for coming on. I know you and I have known each other for quite a bit. I think we probably first met maybe at Osmosis, of all places. And then I kept seeing you at different events. Or actually, you know what? I'm sorry. We met at a spy dinner. Gil Alba, I think, had brought you and said, "Hey, come here. You got to meet my friend Jane." Right? And here we are. Terrible Gil Alba impression, but...
No, it was a very good impression. Gil Alba and Luzaneri, both a spy at the time.
Yep.
And that's exactly where we met. And then the next time we met was at Osmosis. And around that time, I think you were starting your podcast.
I was, yeah.
So I remember you talking about it.
Yeah. So you are a former special agent for the FBI. Tell me a little bit about your career and how you got into doing private investigation.
So I wanted to be a special agent with the FBI since I was 12 years old. And so that story has to do with J. Edgar Hoover, going back a few decades now. But when he passed away in 1972, all of a sudden, the law was enacted that allowed females to apply to the FBI as special agents. And so, I was looking at these articles, and I just said, that's the fit for me. I mean, I was 12, but I knew. And so I called the Boston FBI office when I was 12 years old. And I said, what what do I need to do? And at that time, I mean, they still want lawyers and accountants, but now they need a broad range of backgrounds in their applicants. But at the time, those were the two focuses.
That's awesome.
They call it a second career. So, they want people who have some experience. So you can't really get in as an agent until you're 26 years old.
Right.
So it was accounting or lawyer, and accounting was, a lot fewer years in college. So I said, okay, I'll be an accountant. So I did that and eventually applied and got into be an FBI agent. And I loved it. I mean, every single day was a wonderful day. It was the greatest career. Right. The whole time I was there for 28 years, I focused on white collar crime, complex investigations. And for about 18 years, I was on the evidence response team, which is a team that, does local, state, national, international crime scenes. And we collect forensic evidence, package label, collect it properly. And then, it's in a condition where the chain of custody is perfect. And it's also packaged to go to a crime lab or FBI lab or wherever its destination is.
I can appreciate that. I had at John Jay College, when I was a student there, I had a forensic science class, and I had this one professor, that I submitted my my assignment and all that, and she gave me like I guess she gave me like a B or something, and she wrote on it, it would have been an A had you sealed things properly. Like I didn't put enough tape, or I didn't do something like the right way, or I didn't put my initials over it, something. And I was like, I'm never going to do that again. Like I'm never not going to do it. Like I was so angry. And to this day, I'll go out and collect evidence where it's not even really that super important on personal injury cases. I mean, it is, but it's not really. I think the last time I did it was a tree that fell down and struck a car. I found the tree, and we needed to take pieces of it and bag it so an arborist can look at it. So I'm like sealing it up and doing all that. And I bring it to the attorney. He goes, what is all this? I'm like, it's protecting the chain of custody, man. Like, it's you got to do. So yeah, it was very.
Was it a piece that was like the tree was dime size, but by the time you got it to the attorney, it was like the size of a filing cabinet, right?
No, this was a big. This was a big thing. I found a big chunk of that thing, and it was sitting in the back of my car. In a big black plastic bag, all sealed up for a bit.
Yep, never make that mistake again.
So that turned out into a multi-million-dollar case. So he was very happy it all worked out.
Oh, excellent.
He just settled that case. Yeah. So, yeah. And then the 12-year-old thing that you're saying, I can relate to that, because for me, it was NASA, right? I was obsessed with being an astronaut, and I had my letters out to them and all this other stuff. In fact, I was, 13, I think 12 or 13 when the Challenger happened. And, in my school, we were supposed to have a direct satellite feed to the Challenger, right? We were one of the schools that got selected to do the virtual classroom, right? So they had this big, huge contest, and I won. I was like one of the 6 people that got chose to do it, to be a part of it. And just watching that happen live was absolutely crazy. And there's a really great documentary actually on Netflix about it. I definitely recommend it. But yeah, it was.
What's the name of it?
I don't know, something with the Challenger.
Something about the Challenger.
I'm unprepared on that. Usually I'm pretty good, but yeah, it's something about the Challenger. But
have you been paying attention to everything going on Mars this week? It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, very cool stuff.
And as we're recording this today, actually, SpaceX just went up this morning down in Florida. So there was
nice. I heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is your goal to go up in space on a SpaceX ship?
Something, right? But that's not happening. So, I have too many mouths to feed. I won't be doing anything dangerous like that. It was cool. So I appreciate, you being of a certain age and wanting to do something, like, because I was kind of the same way. I mean, it's one of the, I guess not the reason I went into investigations, but it was the whole thing with history was always very interesting to me. And the idea of, law enforcement was appealing to me. Now, I hit that age in high school and college in the 90s, early 90s, when it was very hard to get a job if you didn't know somebody. There were just a lot of necessary procedures in place to make sure it was fair for everybody.
Right.
And I didn't meet those qualifications, right? I was scoring in the high 90s on tests, and I wasn't even getting interviews.
Right.
So everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely. I mean, look at you now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, nothing. Can I be an astronaut? So it's interesting you chose the math route over the law route. I probably would have done the opposite.
Well, now I wish I had my law degree, so I might go back to law school. But at the time, it was like I loved law, and I mean, I loved math, and I did not necessarily want to go to college for that many years. So it was a no-brainer to me at the time.
Path of least resistance. Good for you.
Exactly.
So can you talk about like any of the cases you worked on? I mean, I don't need names or anything like that, but maybe some of the instances where, the evidence was something that you didn't expect going in that you had to collect and you were a little nervous about maybe.
Well, I have a really cool story about sort of something unique that might sound a little bit different. So it was 2011. And if you remember, there was a period of time where Somali pirates were hijacking boats of all sizes.
Yeah, sure.
So at the time, I'm on the evidence response team, and the FBI office in New York, where I was at the time, where I was assigned, got a request from NCIS to help them execute a search on a motor tanker named the Smyrny, which had been hijacked a year prior to the call for help.
Okay.
So 2 of us from the evidence response team volunteered to go, and the boat was moored right off the coast of Oman at the time. So we flew to Salalah, Oman, and met the NCIS people. And so what had been happening what led up to the NCIS request was there were negotiations going on between the pirates who had the ship and a lot of hostages. I think there were 26 people on board who were hostages.
Wow.
And so the owner of the ship and the pirates had been in negotiation, and they were just about to settle negotiations and finalize. And that's when we got called. So it was a long trip. By the time we get there, negotiations had fallen through completely, but now we're 24-hour trip away from the United States. So NCIS asked us to stay. Hopefully negotiations would work out. So we stayed in this incredibly beautiful seaside resort for little under a week before negotiations finally did work out. And so then we took once it was done and the ransom was paid, it was a multi-million-dollar ransom. We took a boat out to the tanker and we boarded the tanker. We had specialists with us so that they could make sure that the hostages were okay and get them the right resources and advocacy that they needed. So that was sort of one aspect of it. But then the rest of us were there for the evidence. So we went through this enormous, oil tanker. It was still filled with oil. And, the pirates had been living there for a year, and they weren't really all that concerned with personal hygiene and things like that.
They weren't swabbing the deck, huh?
They were not swabbing the deck. So there's also Somalians, I think a vast majority of the population, they've been affected by COVID for this, but they have a leaf called khat. It's spelled Khat, and they're heavy users of this, and it's a leaf that you chew, and it's a stimulant. So the pirates got daily shipments of khat and chewed it, and there were several pirates using this. So, but a year later, there's like carpeting. There's not 1 inch of floor that doesn't have at least 3 or 4 inches of these old leaves.
A DNA dream for somebody.
So that just was another element that made it sort of different and interesting. So we searched the vessel. everything went to NCIS because they were the lead agency on that. So they took the evidence at the end of the day.
Right.
And sadly, I don't think anyone was prosecuted on that case. I did a little research to see, prosecution of these kinds of cases. There weren't any Americans involved in that particular case. But if you remember, I think it's called Captain Phillips with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I'm the captain now. Yep.
Yep. That, and then there was a sailboat that got hijacked with two couples. They were missionaries handing out Bibles.
Yes.
So there was another case that involved Americans.
I remember that.
Yeah.
1:30 p.m.
That's crazy. That's very interesting to be involved in all that. Did you slip them any notes that said, "Hey, wait another few days before we start negotiating? Like this resort's very nice. Like, I got to even my tan."
It was a beautiful beach. I'll say that.
I'm not ready yet. That's pretty awesome. So what was it like being over there, representing the United States? Did you have to wear like a headdress and all that? Was it hardcore over there, or was it a little more laid back?
So in Oman, where we were in Oman, we didn't have to wear a headdress. I've also been deployed to Saudi Arabia, and there, that was much more strict. We were on the air base, and if we left the base, we had to have, the entire body covered.
Right.
Plus, we couldn't have any religious symbols. So, like, if we had a cross, we couldn't even bring that in country.
So that time of year, or that time, well, not that time, but I guess in the early 90s, my best friend was doing political studies through his school, and he was Jewish, right? And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to Israel." I was like, "Great." So he calls me when he's there. He's like, I think the name of the city was Ramallah or something. He goes, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like, it's crazy here. Like, they're burning tires, they're rioting, they're doing all that." He's like, I gotta get rid of my Jewish star. Like, I gotta put it somewhere because it's like super dangerous. I was like, "Do whatever you got to do, man."
Yeah, whatever you have to do for safety, right?
His last name was Schwartz, so he had to change his name. Like,
that's okay. Whatever it takes.
But I'm sorry, you reminded me of that. That's really cool. Very interesting. I mean, I see a lot of what you have done in your career with the FBI translating into what you're doing now. Essentially, the passion for helping people that have had a very terrible situation happen to them, and almost being like an advocate, or doing your job, what you know how to do to help them get what they're trying to do, right? So we're going to talk more about that later after the break, but I definitely see that correlation. And before we do take the break, I want to talk about your other project here too. Tell me a little bit about your website.
Okay, so when I retired from the FBI, I decided to become a private eye. So the reason why mostly was because I wanted to continue doing what I loved, which was investigations. And I couldn't find I didn't want to go into a corporate job. I didn't want that kind of structure. And so being a PI seemed to be the best fit for me. And I think it was a good decision. Right. So not only did we start a PI company, I started with another retired FBI agent,
right,
Charlie Baudouin. I don't know if we can do that. But
well, you tell me. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, with Charlie. He's pivoting out though now, so we're in a pivot mode with the PI company. But part of what Charlie and I did also was we started something called Secure FBI Directory. So what that is it's a small directory, about 150 people are in it, and they're all former agents who now do some kind of PI work or do referrals for PIs.
Right.
So a lot of people are out there and get calls a lot, hey, do you have somebody in Guam that can do a surveillance? And they may not be a PI, but they may, want to make those kinds of referrals. So, so we operate that. We just published our fourth annual directory, and we're building our team there. So, it's something I'm proud of. We built from scratch, and we cover the globe in over 80 specialties. So it's kind of a cool little directory.
That is neat. Yeah. And I've actually, we sponsor the directory too, because I think that that's just an awesome idea. And
we're very happy to have you as a
yeah,
sponsor.
yeah, and likewise, right? You sponsored this program too, right? You scratch my
Yes.
back, I'll scratch yours. So just having that access, I mean, you guys went through a pretty amazing career, right? So you've developed relationships, and just being able to have that ability to tap into somebody where you know that they have the same training that you have, and you know that they're going to do
Right.
hopefully the same job that you would do, right? So is that level of comfort? I think it's a great idea. I think it's really, really great. So yeah, keep doing that stuff.
Yeah, and it helps us too. I mean, part of why we started that directory, because when I retired, there was one in existence, and then they stopped doing business, and we relied on them so much. So, I mean, in the last month, I've used the directory. I have a case that's in New Jersey, but most of the interviews are going to take place in Atlanta. And we wanted a female. So, I went to the directory, and there are 4 people in the Atlanta area in the directory, and one is a female. And so I called her, and she's, fabulous.
Right.
And then last week we had something in really rural Western Tennessee. And there were some people who covered that area too. I mean, it was
really?
it was great.
You FBI folks, you just want to unplug and get away from everybody.
That's right, especially when they retire.
Either that
or
or
later in their career.
They got a moonshine business on the side, maybe, but don't ask, don't tell.
That's right. That's why their rates are great too.
Exactly. That's awesome. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I really want to get into the topic for today, and we're going to talk about sexual assault and the investigator's role in that in the private industry, and talk about some ideas and some things you've come up with and that are out to market now, which I think is really neat. So everybody sit tight, and we will be right back.
Reliable evidence, whether in the form of video, witness statements, open source research, is critical to success in litigation and alternative dispute resolution. For nearly 40 years, the legal, corporate, and insurance communities have placed their trust in Spaier Investigations to deliver secure intelligence and actionable results. Led by Stuart Drobny, Spaier offers investigative and litigation support services across a diverse set of practice areas, including insurance, business intelligence, intellectual property, telecommunications, and family law matters. Headquartered outside of Philadelphia, Spaier is licensed throughout the Mid-Atlantic states, Florida, and maintains a trusted network of global partners to handle the most complex of cases. Call 800-355-1199 or email info@stumarinv.com and reference PI Perspectives for a free consultation, training, or partnership opportunities. Visit stumarinv.com for more information.
Are you overwhelmed with your current caseload? Could you use some help with your skip trace assignments? With Merlin Locate Services, rather than adding staff, you can add an entire skip trace department of licensed private investigators who specialize in skip tracing. Check out merlinlocate.com today. When you work with Merlin Locate Services, you bring on a valuable experience and trusted extension to your team.
I want to talk to everybody today about ScopeNow.com. ScopeNow has been a big-time sponsor of this program for quite some time, and I just love their service. I've been using them since the beginning. I'm one of their beta customers, and it's been so awesome to see them grow into the business that they are today, and just how they just keep reinventing themselves and pushing themselves to get more and more information. What it comes down to is ScopeNow is a tool that you definitely need to use if you do social media investigations, any internet research, and really spending less time digging around and looking for information. I think is one of the best points of how ScopeNow can help you. Their AI platform, their analytics are amazing. You really get an idea of what you need. You're reducing the time, you're reducing the manpower that you're spending on doing this research, because they're essentially doing it for you, and they're doing it correctly, which is most important. One of the new things that they're actually offering is this flagging system where you can flag behaviors and really highlight and look out for fraud. If you're doing a lot of fraud research, this is a fantastic tool, and you can set up alerts So you have particular people that you're looking at. You can actually set up alerts to get notifications when the criteria that you set up is actually is flagged and goes off. It's really, really amazing. And their relationship and association analytics are top notch, really cutting edge and really, really cool. When they brought that out on version 3, it was a game changer. I mean, really being able to see how people interact together and having that relationship, analysis is really, really something that's cool. One of the other things about being involved with Scope Now is their ability to offer webinars. Their team is cutting edge on putting together and getting out really, really great content. If you're a member of Scope Now, if you know who they are, you've seen them around on LinkedIn, you'll know that they're constantly doing webinars on these new websites that are coming out, and they're really staying on top of it. And don't forget, any reports that you generate, you can actually white label those reports and put your own logos on and really make them look professional, which could equate to more billing for you as well. So check them out today. It's www.scopenow.com. They're a great, great company. They should be one of the tools in your toolbox, along with whatever kind of search engines you do. You need to make sure that Scope Now is a part of that suite. Scopenow.com.
Have you heard about the NALI conference on June 23rd through June 25th? NALI heads to San Antonio, Texas for the premier live conference event of the year. You don't want to miss this great opportunity, so visit NALI.com to learn more. NALI.com.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is your host, Matt Spaier. We're here today with Jane Mason. Jane, how you doing? Welcome back to the program.
I'm doing great, Matt.
Okay, so before we jumped out, we teased a little bit about this new project, this new thing you're doing. And it has to do with sexual assault and sexual assault cases. So during your time with the FBI, you definitely saw your fair share of evidence gathering for these types of cases. So walk me through a little bit what you got going on now and how you got to what you're doing now.
So the reason I started focusing on sexual assault, I really only worked on one in the FBI because it's not typically a federal crime unless there's some nexus to another federal crime. And in a civil rights violation case that I had, it did involve sexual assault. But that was the only one. And I can talk about that. But as I became a PI, I was hired by females only. I mean, this is a crime that affects everybody, but it just was coincidentally all females who hired me,
right.
Who had been sexually assaulted and needed help with one aspect or another of navigating the system.
Right.
Some of them had collected evidence and they weren't sure if it was being analyzed, and they didn't know how to get in touch with the crime labs to find out. And they were also hesitant to be their, a strong voice for themselves.
Right.
So, I was able to help them get in touch with the lab and, ask the right questions and get the evidence reports and ask the follow-up questions if something didn't seem thorough or DNA profile hadn't been developed, why not? We're just trying to learn about this particular person's case.
Sure.
So a lot of the people who had come to me did not come forward right away early on after the sexual assault, and they did not have any evidence.
Right.
So those people decided to come forward later, like later being a couple of years after the crime had been committed.
Right.
And so as I got more and more involved with people like that, at the same time, there were news stories. Christine Blasey Ford was one at the time. And, it had been decades since the assault that she was talking about and alleging had happened.
Right.
I kept saying, if these crime victims had saved their own evidence, just on the chance that they might come forward in the future,
right,
then maybe they could corroborate allegations if they come forward later.
Not everybody has a Linda Tripp friend. That's
not everybody has a blue dress. Or, E.G. and Carol has a black dress.
Right.
So that remains to be seen. Stay tuned on that one.
Right.
That's exactly right. I use the example of Monica Lewinsky pretty often.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows that story, and everybody's familiar with the fact that she had it for months and months in her closet, and the FBI really wanted that dress.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, they got the dress, analyzed the dress, and we have so many senators and people in Congress relying on the results of the DNA profile that was developed from the semen stain on that dress when it matched President Clinton. So
interesting side story on that. So a good friend of mine, he worked down in Washington, and he worked for a senator, and he got access to that report before it was released, and he decided to come up to New York to visit me just for for the weekend or whatever. And he was on the train and he was reading it. Well, there was a guy sitting next to him who saw what it was, and he's like, "Hey, what are you reading there?" And they got to chatting a little bit, and he didn't let the guy read it. Like he was good in that way. But the guy sitting next to him owned a public relations company, which could have been a complete disaster had he let the guy read it. But he was so impressed with my friend that he offered him a job. He's like, "Hey, when you leave Washington, come work for me." And that's exactly what my buddy did. And it turned into a really big job, actually. So it was very random. And I got to say, he came up to New York. He wouldn't let me read the report. Yeah, it was very
good.
Yeah, it was
very good
of him.
Kudos to him.
Yeah. So it's just random. You never know when you're on an airplane or a train or whatever, and you're reading something, someone's looking over your shoulder. You got to be careful.
It's true. You never know.
Yeah. So, so collecting evidence, you identified this need for these victims on the private side to help them figure out how to connect the dots here, essentially, right?
Right. And so I did some research before I really did anything, just to see if something was already out there. I actually assumed that there were products out there that would help the civilian, someone untrained and potentially traumatized, to keep their own evidence. Because, if you weren't making a split-second decision right then after the crime to have your evidence collected, sexual assault, the evidence goes away very, very quickly. 3 to 5 days is the maximum in most jurisdictions. Right. That the evidence can be collected. So I did that research, and I found that there was no product out there at all. There were all kinds of products out there for other kinds of crimes and how to help people collect evidence in those kinds of crimes, but nothing for sexual assault. So I did some more research, and I found several criminal cases and civil cases in which the crime victim had collected an item of evidence, and it was later upheld in court that it was admissible. In fact, it wasn't even really questioned in most cases. It was just, the victim had this item, and so law enforcement.
I got a question.
Okay.
So would you say that when you're getting hired here at this point, is it more that they're trying to, I guess, gather enough information for prosecutors to possibly indict, or is it more along the lines of, now we want to have a civil case? So is the work that you're investigating for, is it more on a criminal matter or more on a civil matter?
Almost in all cases, it's been on criminal matters. And I have had some cases where the cases weren't being prosecuted or even really investigated. So sort of how to approach law enforcement and the prosecutors to find out what they're thinking, and hopefully present them with some evidence that will turn their thinking and maybe agree with us that it's a crime worth investigating and prosecuting.
Right. So I've noticed a trend actually in the last year or two where there have been some of the firms I do business with that are doing civil suits against people that have STDs. They have known STDs, and they're knowingly transferring it to other people.
Infecting people.
Yeah, like random. I've probably had like 3.
Really?
Yeah, in the last year or so. A very, very interesting concept there, right? And how do you prove that somebody knowingly infected somebody? And it's one of the people, they was all over the place. I mean, if you look at his social media, that's all he was talking about. He was obsessed with this thing that he had, so he definitely knew he had it. And,
right.
And he, unfortunately, he did share that with somebody else. So,
and those are challenging cases because then the victims have to prove who they've been with, and a lot of private information has to be provided.
Right.
Very difficult, challenging cases.
So let's say somebody wants to get into doing this type of work. They share the same passion that you share on sex assault cases. How do you begin as a private investigator in assisting family on gathering info for this?
You know, it's an interesting crime. Every single sexual assault is very, very different. So you have to be ready to triage an investigation and determine what's needed. In every single case, there's something different about it. Some people just simply aren't getting the attention that they need. Some people aren't getting justice that they need. Some people aren't getting the crime lab to actually examine their rape kits. I'm sure you've heard of the, extensive backlogs of the rape kit analysis. So there are just so many issues with prosecuting sexual assault cases that each investigation is very, very different. The most challenging one I had involved the daughter of a friend of mine. So it's a woman I've known her whole life. And when she went to college, she was sexually assaulted as a freshman. And she could not bring herself to tell anyone for 2 years. So 2 years later, and she didn't collect any evidence, but 2 years later, she's trying to report the crime, and she was having a really, really hard time. And the crime scene unit that she went to, really sort of did a victim blaming kind of game with her. And it was really hard to watch that happen. She was told, I was on the phone with her with one detective who said, the perpetrator didn't use enough force to have you, claim sexual assault, or you didn't say no often enough,
Clearly that guy
So
doesn't have any
lots of
daughters.
I know. Very, very hard to see women go, any victim go through that.
Yeah.
So each case is very different, but we can help as investigators. There are many other careers that of people who work with sexual assault survivors as well.
Yeah. I would think that, you almost have to have a degree in psychology to take on that
Yep.
kind of work.
Yep,
To be able to
absolutely.
identify some things too. I could see that would be a heavy part
Absolutely.
of it. So, yeah, I'm sure you've seen your fair share of different types of cases. So tell me a little bit more about this product, this thing that you came up with, then that you're offering to people to help them, gather evidence. What does that look like?
So once I knew that evidence collected by a sexual assault survivor was admissible in court, and had analyzed the chain of custody, potential chain of custody issues, law enforcement starts a chain of custody typically. So, as a law enforcement officer, when I got evidence from a crime victim, I started the chain of custody, and I would note, okay, it came from Jane Doe, crime victim, but I was the first person on the chain of custody. So once I had analyzed all those types of things, we spent months and months and months putting together a kit that we felt was geared toward someone untrained in evidence collection, and so somebody who is potentially traumatized and untrained would be able to collect their own evidence in a logical sequence, and then package it, seal it, and document it all well enough. So if they decided a week later or 50 years later to come forward with it, it would still be intact and in the best shape possible for the situation.
Right.
So we called it the Preserve Kit. We're no longer in business. We launched in August of 2019. And by September of 2019, I was receiving cease and desist orders from attorneys general offices from various states because they felt that I was violating the consumer privacy laws.
Right.
They didn't have the kit, so they hadn't seen the kit, and they didn't know what was in the kit. But both on the website that I had for the kit and within the directions, I had so many disclaimers.
Right.
For example, I would say there's nothing that's going to guarantee that anything you collect is going to be admissible in court. Right. Lots of disclaimers like that. And I did that because I know even as an FBI agent, nothing that I take from a crime scene, if I do everything perfectly, there's no guarantee that it's going to be admissible.
It's human interpretation. I've seen that on any case I've been involved with where I've gotten called in to testify on something. At the end of the day, it's a judge
Exactly.
making a call, and it's not always going to be a guarantee. Like, I've seen things where you would be surprised, like, how could anyone decide that? Well, it happened. Like, I've seen many attorneys lose an unlosable case,
Absolutely.
and I've seen people like hit home runs on cases that they were just, they had no business being in a courtroom. Like, it should have been summary judgment, like, out a long time ago. And you just never know. There's the human factor.
Right. You never know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some cases where evidence collected illegally was admissible. In one environmental crimes case that I had, the samples were supposed to, the samples were critical to our case,
right,
because they showed PCBs were in this particular area. And the expert sampler from the environmental agency left the samples in his car for a while, rather than bringing them straight to the lab or to lock up somewhere. And
he must be Ryan Braun's friend. You're a certain age, you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't have a fun day in court having to testify about that, but that was admissible too. I mean, so, the judge makes the final decision.
Yeah.
The other reason why I felt it was so important to do this, there's a forensic nurse named Julie Valentine, and she's based in Utah. She was on a different podcast, which is a very cool podcast. It's all about sexual assault, and it's called Surviving Justice.
Okay.
And she was a guest on there a while back, and she said that the majority of the rape kits that are done, so the rape kits done in the hospital, she said that most of them don't produce a DNA profile. Mm-hmm. So I knew if the professionals doing rape kits didn't regularly come up with a DNA profile, that we'd have, we as civilians would have a pretty decent chance of at least once in a while getting a profile and getting some decent evidence.
Right.
And the cease and desist orders also were a lot about, don't give a survivor false hope. And I understand that totally. And to be sure, I do not want to lead anyone down sort of the garden primrose path to a place of further disappointment. But I do think that sexual assault survivors and all crime victims need every possible hope. And I do think that this is something that they can do as far as saving their own evidence if they can't come forward right away to the hospital or to law enforcement.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as an investigator looking into all this stuff, what do you think are some of the mistakes that somebody trying to do this stuff does and they don't even realize they're doing?
When you're collecting your own evidence?
Yeah. Like, let's say I'm a PI. Somebody's hired me to look into one of these issues. An assault happened, and the family now wants to hire you or whatever. What would you say would be a mistake that an investigator would want to try and avoid? Maybe not doing something.
So a lot of the evidence is going to be on swabs. So if you're collecting a dry bodily fluid, you want to wet your swab very slightly, like with 1 or 2 drops of distilled or sterile water, hopefully, if you have that around. And then you want to swab the bodily fluid. So then the challenge is getting that swab to dry without having it touch any other surface before you package it, because it has to be dry before it's packaged, or else it will leak through and it has to be packaged in paper. Right. Plastic will, degrade DNA. Right. So, you have to rig something up to let the swab dry. So you have to package everything separately. There are lots of evidence collection rules.
Yeah, sure.
But if you do stick with some of the basics, cross-contamination, and, one swab for one bodily secretion, bodily fluid, It's all fairly logical. So I do think someone untrained, if they have the steps written down, I think that they would be okay collecting their own evidence.
I think you just triggered me with the procedures and all that. I'm reflecting back to the B that I got on my my paper instead of the A.
You
Thanks,
need to
Jane.
let that go.
You've just ruined the rest of my day. Thank you.
You really need to let that go.
I really do. It's been many years. No, I joke about it, but that was actually probably one of the better things that happened to me, because it was a lesson for me that, hey, like, you got to really razor focus when it comes to this stuff, because the importance of it is you get one chance. If something's
Right.
thrown out, and how could I live with myself if something is thrown out because I didn't follow one little procedure, but I know the end result of what I got would solve the case and prove what happened. But because I didn't seal it a certain way, it's not, it creates reasonable doubt. Like, I don't think I could live with myself. So it's,
Well, exactly. And really I hate to say the expression, but the devil is in the details, right? So if
true.
you seal it properly and label it properly and document it properly and et cetera, then at the end of the day, you have something that you can bring forward with you to corroborate what you're saying.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So we're going to wind down here. I really appreciate you coming on. This was awesome. And I love meeting different investigators. I mean, I know you, but I love introducing other investigators to people that do interesting things in our industry. And I think what you're doing is interesting, and your passion for what you do is really awesome. So how do folks get a hold of you if they had more questions?
So first, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
Mhm.
To get in touch with me, I have 2 websites and I'm on social media. So the 2 websites, one is secureinvestigation.com, no S at the end of investigation. The other one is securefbidirectory.com. And then on social media, I'm Jane X FBI on most social media, I think, except for LinkedIn, where I'm Jane Mason.
Yeah, I think that Jane X FBI was taken on LinkedIn, right?
Probably.
Oh.
I don't know who that is. An imposter.
All right. We're going to wind in here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning
Okay.
in. We appreciate it. And we'll catch everybody on the next show. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Jane, for coming on and talking about these important topics. We appreciate your passion for helping victims of these horrible crimes. We also want to thank Crosstrack's Secure FBI Directory, Merlin Locate, Scope Now, Nally, and Stewmore Investigations for sponsoring the show. Don't forget to check out investigatorstoolbox.com. You can join through the app available on iOS and Android platforms. You'll be able to access the whole site right from your smartphone. There's no better time than today to finally sign up for the site. For just 49 cents a day, you can take advantage of some great networking, training, and data resource management. So use code PIP201836 to save an extra $20. And if you have a question or comment about the show, just email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. He'd like your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. And we'll be back on Monday with a new show. So make sure you tune in. And hey, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts and a few kind words. Thank you, and stay safe out there.